Hi, and welcome again to the Path to Profit podcast. I'm Brad Dobson with my wife and partner in crime, Dr. Minette Riordan. And today we welcome Dr. Axel Meierhoefer to the show. Welcome, Axel.
Yeah, hi guys, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Great, we're excited to have you here. And we always start our shows with a quote.
Okay.
So since our theme today is about diamond formation leadership, which if you don't know what that is, just hold on, we're going to share you. I have a quote about leadership from Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. And Sheryl says that leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that impact lasts in your absence. I really love that, about making sure that impact lasts in your absence. So we're in for a fun ride with Axel talking about leadership today. We're going to share a little bit about his bio. And we just want to say to everybody that we know this is a really busy season, and we appreciate you taking time to listen to the Path to Profit podcast and not to slow down, right? It's still mid-December. You've still got a couple of weeks. I'm feeling all of my clients starting to want to wane in their business activities. And the truth is, it's like, just get all the way to the end of your goal. So if you're still working on some of those goals, don't give up. I was talking to a client this morning. I'm like, what do you want to accomplish before the end of the year? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, how about getting 2 new clients?
Sell.
Yeah.
Sell.
Well, and build relationships and set the foundations for what's happening next year. So I just, it's what's on my mind right now. And when it comes to being a leader of one, because so many of the people in our audience are solopreneurs or couplepreneurs like we are, it can be hard to have that motivation. There's no external drive. There's nobody saying when you have to do anything or how to do it. So make sure you're staying on that path to profit. Uh-oh. We lost Axel. So as we get into our conversation, I want to share a little bit about Axel with you so that you have a little sense of who it is that we're connecting with today. So I'm going to try to pronounce your name properly. Dr. Meierhoefer, did I get it right?
Very close, yeah. Good.
Awesome. It's a good thing he said it first earlier before the recording started. So he's a very, very experienced leadership expert, keynote speaker. He's done a lot of corporate training and leadership, but mostly he's known for his diamond formation leadership model that he teaches both in companies and to individuals. He was born in Germany and joined the Air Force, where he served 22 years as an aviator and an instructor. So that might give you some clues about that diamond formation piece. And he retired from the Air Force in 2001 to go on to what's been an awesome career since then. I won't go into all the details. You can read his longer bio as part of our show notes on the Path to Profit Academy website. So before we get to the questions, I'd love to hear a little bit about what are you working on now or really excited about in your business right now, Axel?
Right, yeah, thank you guys. Well, one thing about the quote that you mentioned earlier, what immediately came to mind, and I've used this in some of the speeches and presentations that I've done. And I don't know if you've heard this, there's this De Beers slogan that says diamonds are forever.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that, in the combination of you want to have a lasting impact even if you're not there, that's some of what I'm also striving for. And that's also why I'm getting more and more into keynote speaking, breakout sessions, bigger events and conferences. It's just to reach more people and have more impact and hopefully lasting impact.
Yeah.
So, that's definitely some of what I'm working on. And in that context, I mean, the challenge to some extent is I have my model about diamond formation leadership, but I also always want to be of service to the audience or to the event planner or to the organization that is asking me to come in and help them or speak to them or present something to them. So in that context, I'm always working on how can I do a certain component and balance between customizing what they need so it really resonates with their group, employees or audience, and still give them a good indication and a good understanding of what the model is about and how it can benefit them. So that's what I'm constantly working on, and even beyond the end of the year, that's probably going to be a process for the long run to do.
So I love that sense because I would imagine that a lot of people who are listening to the podcast also want to be doing more speaking in 2017. And if they don't, they should be, because it's one of the fastest ways to grow your business is doing speaking. And whether you're doing a workshop or a breakout, the number one question you have to ask is who's going to be in the audience and what do they need from you? That being said, I love Axel, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this, what you said before we started the recording, which is about creating this core content that's uniquely yours, and that is really about sharing your story as well as the skills and talents that you bring, and just reminding people that what they're sharing on stage isn't just business tactics or strategy, but it's also that personal element as well.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and so what happened for me, basically, like you mentioned in your introduction, I retired from the Air Force after a pretty long and for me fascinating and interesting, challenging career. I really loved to be there. But when my body kind of didn't allow me to fly anymore, it became a logical choice to say, okay, do you want to be there? And like in the Air Force, we say, fly a desk or get out. I didn't, at the time at least, wanted to make the decision to fly a desk, even though it's kind of a little bit puts a smile on my face when I consider how many hours I'm sitting in front of the computer these days, right? So, but that was basically the reason to get out. And in the time after I got out, I had always gotten the Air Force material. Sometimes I had developing it, or sometimes it was developed by people in the Air Force, and then we used it to teach and instruct. And when I got out and got recruited into your area, actually, like we talked earlier, in the Santa Barbara area, I worked for a software company to develop their training and customer service department. And again, it was basically their software, their training program, and I developed the trainers and all the other stuff that came with it. And over the years, more and more, I realized that when you look a little bit of how do you actually brand yourself, like, because ultimately when we look at how do we generate profits, how do we make our business successful, yes, there is the corporate world that I'm serving when I do workshops or develop something around the model. But the other aspect is, how do they know about me? How do they know that I have to provide something different if I basically use other people's material? And that's where this evolution has come to the Diamond Formation Leadership Program. Is you find out, at least for me it was the case, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have similar experiences, that there are certain things that you are passionate about and that other people have other perspectives about it.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, that basically triggered to start tapping into my network and say, okay, so for those who I believe are already successful, either by revenue, profit, or some other means, following on social media, whatever it may be, how did you get there? And I heard recurring stories about, yes, I consider myself an expert, like I'm saying, and I believe very strongly that I can prove that I'm a leadership expert and a thought leader in my area of essential skills for leaders. And at the same time, when somebody said, so what's your special thing? Or some people say, what's your USP? Or what's your new selling proposition? I, for a long time, thought, well, the fact that I know how leadership works and how it impacts people and how you can create a vision and a mission statement, how you can better communicate, all those things. And that became like this kind of rambling on kind of thing of the description, until I realized, you know, there are really 4 things that I'm really passionate about. And those 4 things fit into this model. And then when I connected to my time in the military, it came to this realization that flying in diamond formation happens to have 4 corners or 4 planes, right? And then 4 things. And at some point, even you know, like you hit it. If somebody tells you often enough there are 4 things, obviously there are 4 things, then even I realized, okay, so those 4 things are relevant. And that's how the model came out. And if I bring that back to what you asked about your audience and making programs, it's really pretty interesting. I started to put a name to it and a title to it and so forth about a year ago from now, which goes to your point, right? I mean, it happened to me to kind of really make a commitment even before January 1st, because it just had evolved that way. And since I've put a name on it, people say, oh, you're so passionate about it. And we totally get it. And it has these 4 corners, and I can show how it looks. I have the imagery of the planes in my one page or my web page, so forth and so forth. And you can put the energy behind it too, right? I mean, as soon as you start getting me onto diamond formation leadership, you have to stop me, because I won't, right? I mean, I can go on and on with power and energy about it and how it helps people and so forth, but now it's mine.
Right.
And it's not that I'm saying other people's stuff is bad. It's just when it becomes yours, some people use this term, you know, it's your baby, or it's something that you nurture and cherish and want to develop and so forth. And to some extent, that's how I feel now, that, you know, I'm working on the book with the same title. I have the web page, I have the keynote speech, I have shorter things, I have workshops, and not all of it is done 100 times. absolutely true. And on the other hand, there is also the motivation to really work on it, whether the year comes to an end or it's just starting or it's in the middle of the summer. That passion is really almost like fuel.
And even though the naming part still feels new, isn't this the same content you've been teaching now for over a decade, right? It's like, don't you feel like everything you've done before has brought you to this place? Yeah,
that's actually an audience may not know that we didn't arrange it that way, but that reminds me when you just said, so the answer is yes, and the short answer is yes. But what it reminds me is I oftentimes in my workshops over the years, whether it's right now or over the years, I've always said, how do you define wisdom? Right? And it might sound a little bit out of left field, but when we go around, what we typically end up with is wisdom is the combination or the sum of knowledge and experience. Right? And so if you accept that as one way to define it, I would answer your point with my version of, like, for example, the corner that describes team building. Brings all the knowledge and experience that I have had the opportunity to learn through the military, through working as an employee and executive in corporate America, and then as a consultant and contributor and service provider for multiple clients. You have the whole list that I sent you. All those different experiences and all those different situations have distilled down a certain view and a certain way of what I recommend for people who are either just becoming leaders or have been leaders and struggling with their team on what I would say these are the things you should focus on team building. Or the same thing, same for collaboration or globalization or cultural sensitivity. It's my view, my lens of that wisdom that has basically emerged over time.
Yeah, and for our listeners, this is such a crucial point. And so I'm new to directly being an entrepreneur, and I can't underscore enough what Axel's talking about. This isn't just in terms of leadership, although you get to claim if you're an entrepreneur, you're to a certain extent a thought leader anyways, but you have to claim who you are, and that's part of being authentic, and people recognize that. And it also means your tribe will find you, and you've defined what your tribe is. And whether you have self-confidence or you don't have self-confidence, you still get to stand up and say, I'm this, I'm X and Y, I have these experiences, I have this knowledge, and it's brought me to this place. And when you can synthesize that, especially like Axel's done into this diamond formation program, whatever you're at the meta level, whatever your name for it is, you've branded yourself, you put yourself out there. This is what I am. And then people can identify with you. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to struggle, because then your ideal client can't find you. They don't know who you are.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great points. Great points.
So you've kind of hinted at these four corners of diamond formation, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what is diamond formation leadership and why are you so passionate about it?
Right. Well, just to give a little bit of a context, where does this name actually come from? Like I mentioned, and you mentioned in your intro, I had 22 years career in the military flying fighter jets. And one of the established ways of how to basically successful to get from where you take off to where you ultimately have to go and deliver whatever the target or the goal is of your mission and then come back, is to get there as much as possible undetected by any kind of enemy defenses. And so, way back when technology wasn't as much developed, the way to do that is to basically fool the enemy. And one way to fool them is to bring multiple planes, like the four that I'm talking about, together as close as possible, which is then called diamond formation, because in less sophisticated radars and technology at the time, when that first came out in the 60s and 70s, on the radar it looked like one blob. And the operator, the enemy operator, if you want to go to that terminology, would see one blob or one plane, and if they see you at all. And then in reality, you have four planes. That means 4 times the potential power to project for whatever the goal of the mission is. And this way of being in diamond formation brings from an aviation point of view a lot of things, like how do you keep perfect position? How do you stay in balance? How do you actually get into the position? how do you get the trust so that you can fly off the leading plane in front of you without necessarily having to pay attention to your surroundings, because you trust the leader up front there that he or she is actually going to pay attention to not just him or his plane, but the other 3 planes within the formation. So that's kind of like where that starts. But when we go to those 4 corners and translate it into the corporate environment, one thing that I believe is important to what you said, Brad, is the entrepreneur as the thought leader and as kind of like the leader of 1 or sometimes leader of 3 or 4. And that makes this connection to what I stand for. When you actually discover it, it makes it almost automatic. It becomes a little bit an additional layer, an additional challenge when you see yourself in a mid-size or even a large company, because the goal is still, I want to be known for something. I want to be authentic in some way, shape, or form. I want to prove that I deserve to have been promoted and now be responsible for this department, this division, but still in the frame of the organization, which sometimes gives this foolish indication as if you don't really need to do something because you're just part of this bigger wheelhouse with all these different gears going on, and it's just part of the evolution. And that's not really true, because when you look at it, those who accelerate particularly fast, when you ask them or ask other people, why did this person achieve what other people take 10 years within 3? You find charismatic, really confident, can motivate his or her team, can really work with anybody from everywhere, is collaborating on peer level up and down all over the place, and is totally aware where the business is in the bigger scheme of things and in the market. And that brings me to those 4 corners. So yes, team building, everybody talks about or has been talking about team building. In the approach that I'm using, it's really a matter of how do you build the team. And what I find is missing, or has been missing, and this is then my particular lens to what we said earlier, is that in many ways we're looking at how do we somehow motivate people within a team. And a lot of people, or almost all people that I know, whether they are like recent entrepreneurs or in bigger businesses, come into their leadership role because they did something well in management. They managed something well or had some project well. And when they are becoming leaders, I try to get through to them that team building in that context and really making a coherent team is spending one-on-one time and small group time with your people, rather than just telling them what you want them to do, which would be management. Right? So that's a clear distinction, and there's a whole lot of different individual little pieces that go to that. The same thing, then another corner, the second one is collaboration. And that is on peer level. How do I collaborate with my fellow leaders? How do I collaborate with people who serve the same boss? And how do I make my team members understand who to collaborate with? Now, when everything is in the same building, that's okay. But if you look at modern organizations, even relatively small ones, we have social media. We reach out all over the country. We reach out into other countries. We might reach out globally. We might have a service center in India, or we might have some other place in Europe that we have as an outsourced manufacturing place that we get part of our materials from. Whatever the situation is, we have a need to collaborate to get this done. And when you look at it back to profit, right, what you guys are basically really experts in is how can I get my service or my product in the most efficient way so ultimately my profit margin is higher. Well, if I do that and I look into the world these days, I need to not only look at how can I collaborate with the people in other places, but the third corner, on a global scale. So globalization is the third part, or the third corner, if you want to. And then the fourth one, which I believe you guys live in California, I live in California, so we live a little bit in like a melting pot kind of environment, which really means if you want to be successful, you want to be confident, you want to be motivating, inspirational, you want to influence without coercion and so forth. If you do those things, then you have to develop as a leader some sort of what I call cultural sensitivity, which is the fourth corner. And when people sometimes ask me, well, is that any way different than diversity? Well, diversity training, diversity and inclusion was one of those buzzwords 2-3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And my answer is yes, it's different, because it's not just a matter to say, I want to make sure that nobody gets mistreated, quote unquote. But it's, from my perspective, is how do we actually take advantage of working together and tapping into the different talents that people from different areas, different upbringings, and different heritage bring, and at the same time make an effort as a leader, especially if we travel or have operations outside of our immediate area, to become sensitive of how they tick. Like I always say, when you go as an American leader to try to get a contract with an organization in Norway, if you physically go there or you do it with Skype, then the expectation is you have a plan and agenda, you're on time, and you go through with like very little chit chat, boom, and to the point, and hopefully the answer is yes or no. If you were to do the same thing in South America, you basically dead on arrival. It has nothing to do that you are better or worse in communicating. It's nothing to do with efficient or inefficient. It has to do with having some sensitivity on what's important. The Norwegians or Germans or people in Northern Europe, they are very direct. They don't necessarily pay much attention to this relationship building. They are more factual, more analytical, more systematic. And South Americans, and there's no good or bad, right or wrong with it, they pay more attention to building a relationship. And so if you don't recognize in which way they like to build a relationship, and you have your agenda, your Skype call, your 20 minutes between two other meetings, there's no time to build a relationship, right? So that just gives you a little flavor that has nothing to do with accepting that people are different. Yes, you want that, and that's kind of the diversity part, but the cultural sensitivity that I'm basically trying to infuse into people has a number of different things that you want to do to go one step further beyond accepting that people are different.
I love that. I love your point that it's you need to go further than just, hey, I don't want to step on this person's toes.
Right,
Yes.
right.
It's actually, how can we take advantage of a better relationship by having that cultural sensitivity? How can we, play to the strengths of both sides of the table, or both? Maybe it's not different sides of the table, just other team members. That's fantastic. And for those of you listening that think, wow, this doesn't apply to me.
It totally does.
Guess what? You're going to hire a VA from the Philippines, and you're going to hire a bookkeeper from Canada, and there are a sales coach from Canada. I'm a Canadian. You got to watch out for those.
Yeah, right.
Shout out to Shannon.
No, absolutely. I mean, see, the thing that I'm also finding is that when we're looking a little bit into the generational side of things, you're talking about who do we hire and who do we have available, unless you are in an organization that is looking for like a for-hire CFO or something like that, right? Where you would have somebody with a whole bunch of experience, having seen kind of all kinds of different things, so they can help you build your business in that financial services area and accounting and taxes and all of that. That would be one example where you bring maybe somebody that might be like part of the baby boomers generation. But for the most part, I would say who we're hiring are in the quote unquote millennial generation, right? And when I ask those folks compared to the a little more mature folks from their business experience, what's the difference, for example, in the space of either diversity and inclusion, or what I call cultural sensitivity, to look a little broader? And they literally differentiate in the sense that they say, we just want to make sure that we don't step on anybody's toes, and be accepting that people are different. If you ask the millennials, and that's part of what I'm bringing out in my keynotes around time information leadership, is that millennials, when you ask them, actually say, we see the benefit. There's an actual benefit for people being different, having different heritage, having this. And so what they're craving is, don't just make everybody equal, but acknowledge the differences and hopefully tap into those different talents, different views, different creative ideas and so forth that stem out of their upbringing and out of their background, and bring them all together and hopefully come up with something unique that nobody has ever done before.
So I love what you're saying, because I feel like it goes full circle back to the beginning of the conversation around personal branding.
Right, exactly.
Right. And that whether you're working in corporate or you're an entrepreneur trying to have a global presence, you need to be conscious of who you are, and it's where you allow your story to shine through. Like the fact that you were born in Germany and served in the United States Air Force, right? It's like there's a story there, and I'm curious, leaning in. I'm like, what's the rest of the story? But it also goes a lot towards how you've built your business and how you've chosen your career. And I love the difference between working in Europe, in Northern Europe especially, and South America. So my PhD is in Latin American literature, right? So spent time there, done a lot of work with the Latin American culture, and it has this completely different flavor that I love, that appeals to the creative, more flow-freeing, free flowing part of me. But I think that cultural sensitivity, like Brad was saying, has an impact for all of us, especially right now at the time that we're in globally, with where leadership is going globally. But I'd love to maybe just pull this back a little bit to a person that's just new to leadership, whether they're new to leadership in their role in their company, or whether they're really having to start seeing themselves as the leader of their own company. They're a startup maybe, and they're hiring their first couple of team members. Where do you start in really improving your leadership skills?
Well, one thing, and that's a great question, Mina, thank you for that. One thing that I suggest at this early stage, when you're getting to what you just described, is to get some clarity around two terms. And they might sound a little bit overly informed from my military background, but I think they apply really all across the board. And those two terms are service and duty. And I mean that in the answer to your question on what's my duty in my role. Now, if you are the business owner as a leader, then you know how, or at least you have an idea, what are your goals? How do you want to grow your business? How big do you want to make it? What's your expectation for this year, 2 years, 5 years down the road? How much of that can you do yourself? And then if you get to that point to say, okay, I need to build a team, I need to bring in people. Mm-hmm. And that basically defines, and there is much more detail behind it, but that is very much in the area of that's my duty. Yeah. And when you actually hire them, then your duty is to make sure you have enough business so you can pay them and support them and all of that. On the service side is, for me, the important aspect is, as a leader, how do I help my people to develop? Right? I always say the biggest service that a leader, regardless whether it's in a small emerging business or in a larger established business, the biggest service a leader can do is help the people on the team to be able to develop their talents to the max extent and hopefully identify at least one person who can ultimately success yourself in that role that you're in right now. Mm-hmm. And that goes a little bit to this whole notion of, if you actually apply for something to get promoted, not as a business owner for a small business, but if you're in a little bit bigger organization and you're not the founder or something like that, and you ask yourself, I want to get to the next level and I apply to get promoted, and let's say you get that promotion. The first thing that either HR, the people around you, or your boss is asking, do you have anybody in mind who we could tap into to fulfill your role when you're moving on to the next bigger thing? And so that's on the service side, is how do I serve my team or my group so that I can, for one, learn about them, and not just in a business sense, but also privately. What do they do? What are they passionate about? What do they struggle with? And so forth. Provide that service, for one, to develop them, find out, like if you go to great book from Jim Collins, as your bus is growing, if you're going from a minivan to a Greyhound bus, right, then you know that you have to look, is everybody still in the right seat, or have the seats changed? Are there unoccupied seats that need to be occupied by people that we either bring in or that we already have? And how do you find out if you don't spend time? So I oftentimes say to people, in this balance between duty and service, you have to ask yourself, how much on the duty side do you really manage the stuff that needs to be managed? And on the service side, how intense is what I call the leadership schedule that you make? I recommend, for example, that depending on size of team, but up to teams with up to 15 people, you should have a weekly, what I call, meeting with everybody. Now, depending on your business, not everybody might always be there, all 15 or all 10 or 12, but whoever is there to come together once a week. And you should have a meeting of anywhere between 30, 45 minutes with every person on your team once a week. Now you ask yourself, well, so how do I get stuff done? Well, my answer to that is, on the duty side, you will have to make a decision if you want to be a manager or a leader.
Yeah.
If you make the decision that you are a leader and you spend 50% of the time to develop and help your people to do the best they can do and get the support that they need, and the other 50% on getting out there, promoting your business, getting up on stage to speak about your business, meet with other people who either can be clients or can be service providers for your business, that is probably a pretty reasonably good balance to strive for. And I find too many, in my view, especially newer entrepreneurs, I mean, I've been doing this now for 11 years and feel I've gotten quite a bit of experience, but newer startup type situations, number one, I think they look for doing everything. It's kind of like this, I have 27 hats that I wear and I just need to decide which one is showing right now.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, okay, we're ready to grow a little bit or get a little bit bigger, then it becomes a matter of, I hire somebody, but do I really trust them? And I believe on the service side, if you take those two things, duty and service, on the service side, it's your duty as the established leader or owner to have those conversations so you develop the trust. And then you can say, okay, you run this department. You're now responsible for my sales or for my marketing or for our accounting or for our customer service or whatever it might be. And that doesn't come from telling them, I want you to do this, I want you to do that.
Right.
That helps, but it comes from building the relationship. So service and duty, I know I went that a little deeper maybe than you wanted to, but really for a business owner or a leader on any kind, or somebody who's just gotten into that role, ask yourself, what's my duty to my company or to the organization I'm part of? And what service do I need to do and provide for my people? And then I would hope that they say, oh, cool, now I know that those two things are important. I wonder how these four corners inform me on what to do. Right? Because
so there was something you said as part of all that. So no, I don't think that you went too deep at all. I thought that was such a great conversation to have, because it's one of the biggest struggles that we see with our clients is wearing too many hats, not trusting or knowing when is the right time to delegate.
I have that problem.
But, and yeah, this one's for Brad especially, but training people to replace you. I don't know if those were your exact words, but when you're a great leader and not a manager, you're literally training people to replace you. And as entrepreneurs, you can't drive the Greyhound bus around empty, right? I mean, you're going to get completely burned out and overwhelmed, right? So no, I really, really appreciated that conversation. Was there a question you were going to ask?
No, that was great.
Yeah, I thought that was super helpful.
Where did we go from here? I think
one thing, if you allow me, I mean, you said training. I would like to see leaders on this lens of service to go a little broader, to train, to mentor, to coach, to inform, to be a good listener, all those things, right? Yes, the training is more the knowledge transfer, but all the other components that make a good leader, how do you develop somebody's self-confidence when they're mortified to lead a meeting in your own company, let alone lead a meeting with customers or potential clients, right? So it's training, yes, but I think it's also expanding more, how can I be a mentor? How can I be a coach? How can I provide the necessary resources? So that I always like this idea, and this comes from stylistically, from where I come from in this collaborative, cooperative approach, looking out for other people, is in service of my team. What can I do in service of my team? And it's a broad opportunity to do all kinds of things. And then you end up more that people, when you ask them, where do you work and what do you do? And people start to describe it's almost like working in a family or a tribe. We all like each other, we know each other, we help each other, that kind of stuff. And you don't get that by just directing people, managing people, or tell them what to do. And I don't know if everybody is striving for that. I know that I strive for that, and a lot of businesses want that, because if you then pay them right and you get that kind of an atmosphere, you really get a lot of juice to do the stuff that the business wants to do.
No, I think that's a beautiful perspective of being in service. It's training is only one small piece of the equation. I think that was a beautiful definition of adding the layers of mentorship, right? It's why people hire coaches like Brad and I, or like you, is to get access to the coaching and the mentorship outside of the training that you're receiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Axel, meant to ask, do you have any events coming up where you're where people could find you, or speaking events, or maybe you could give us more information about how people can find you online?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. Speaking events is typically through more workshop type situations where they would find me, or if they happen to be in the associations or organizations that invite me to do keynotes. So one thing that a friend of mine, Deborah, and I have basically decided is to have a better answer to that question, Brad, is to put on a number of workshops next year, starting right away in January, and we will put them on our Facebook pages, on both of ours, and use Eventbrite for that. The other places, like the online places to find me, is naturally, everything is branding. So diamondformationleadership.com, and you find more details and more information. If anybody says, hey, this sounds really interesting, maybe, you can come and teach us about it, or you could come and do a presentation speech or something like that about it for our team. There's a one-pager on there that you can download. There's a little contact form. I'm on all the different social media platforms pretty much that have any kind of size, so.
Great stuff. Well, this has been fun.
It has been fun, but I know you have a really cool assessment to share with people as well, right? You have a great free gift. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, the gift that I thought would be great for your community and for your listeners is that when people ask me in the past, and even translating that into the Diamond Formation leadership model, what is really the thing about leadership that is not so obvious that I need to become better at? And I say, typically my answer is two things. Number one is you need to know what's your dominant style. And number two is you need to know what the style of all the people in your area of influence is, especially with those that you work on a daily basis. Yeah. So what I thought would be a really nice thing for your listeners is to go to a specific site that I created for that. It's called Stylum Smart. Stylum comes from the Greek, stylum in the context of style. And stylum actually was also used for leaders to be on a pedestal, like up, so that you can give notice to your following.
Nice.
And it's literally stylumsmart.com, and you can go on there, and it has an assessment of questions, and you just basically move little sliders with your mouse and then hit at the very end on the page to the button, and it then basically sends you the PDF with the assessment. And I kept it in a sense easy because there are really only 4 different areas. I like the idea that we can break the stylistic environment into 4 quadrants. And you may have heard something similar like DISC or other style assessment. And I go in that direction too. I'm saying, okay, some people are direct and you want to know if you are. Some people are very creative and energized and in that space or spirited. Then some people are, like I mentioned earlier, collaborative, team-oriented, and so forth. And then others are, the 4th group would be very analytical, systematic, data-driven, and so forth. And so when you know who you are, then you also can explain in some ways, and you get a report after you did the assessment for free that tells you a little bit of what that means, right? When you find out whichever one you are. And then the other interesting aspect of that is when you ask yourself, okay, if I know, let's say for myself, I'm team-oriented, collaborative, and somebody I'm working with is very direct, or somebody I'm working with is very creative and spirited. Yeah. That can, on the one hand, inform you to say, now that tells me a little bit how this person ticks. And if you really start looking a little deeper, which I'm happy to help anybody who's willing to find out about it, or you can, go on Google and do a little research yourself. What you find is there are certain stylistic things that people that are what I call on the diagonal, like team and direct would be on a diagonal relationship, or like a very analytic, data-driven person and a very creative person. The funny example I can always give is the data-driven leader who makes decisions on measured statistical information. Ask somebody who is very spirited, creative, and innovative to create a report by next Friday.
Right.
And gets back a report that is 25 pages long, and it basically illuminates all the different aspects that could be interesting to that decision that needs to be made.
Right.
And knows and thinks that I spent extra time, I worked 10 extra hours this week to create this report, really like pumped that the leader is listening to it, and the leader looks at it and says, just by appearance, not even reading one line, to say, wow, I should have probably told you that I really only wanted 2 spreadsheets.
Right. Yeah.
And what happens with that is, number one, a matter of communication, but the other thing is you're asking somebody who is very expressive and energetic to do something that they probably hate, meaning doing spreadsheets.
Yeah. Right? So I'm going to pause you there in the interest of time. We could have spent we might have to have you back and just talk about that. I'm an assessment junkie. I have one that I do with my clients as well. And so I know we could go down that path of talking about the different assessments, but I just want to just acknowledge that I agree completely. It's so important to understand what your leadership style is as you go forward on this journey. And I'm going to invite our listeners to really take the time to connect with Axel. Go find him on Facebook under Diamond Formation Leadership. I got that one backwards there, Diamond Formation Leadership. Right. Go connect, share. We'll put the link for the assessment in our show notes as well. I love your story. I love what you've created. I love how passionate about the topic that you are. And I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, can't agree more. Thank you so much, Axel.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. And like you said, if anybody wants help, for me, my service lens is always I help others to become successful.
Beautiful. So I'm Dr. Minette Riordan. This is Brad Dobson today with Dr. Axel Meierhoefer on the Path to Profit podcast. Go share your thoughts and opinions on iTunes. We'd love some reviews, and we'll see you on the next show. Have a great day.